Hello, I'm going to describe the Navamsa Chart. You have probably heard of the Navamsa Chart. It's very, very important in Vedic astrology. And I'm going to describe the patterns in the Navamsa Chart, the magic, the beauty, and the blessings of the Navamsa Chart. This is a presentation that I gave at the Jaya Vidya 9th International Conference of Astrology in Perugia, Italy, almost a year ago. It was in July 2017. It's a wonderful conference. Let me show you the website. Here's the website for the conference, jayavidya.org. It's run by Mescalila Nunzia Coppola. She is fantastic. She has a wonderful group of astrologers in Italy. Perugia is about if I remember right, maybe about an hour drive or so north of Rome. Most of the lectures are in Italian. Some are in English and translated to Italian. It's just a beautiful event, wonderful. Mescalila has a lot of expertise in Vedic astrology as well as modern Western astrology. Great group, wonderful conference, beautiful place. So if you ever get a chance to go there, I recommend it. They have a conference every year. Okay, so I gave this lecture there at the conference, and Mescalila agreed I could presented here on YouTube for all of you. Okay. Now, first thing about the Navamsa chart, it's a different way of dividing the circle. It's different from the usual 12 signs of 30 degrees. So in the inner part of this ring, we have the zodiac signs. For no particular reason, I have Leo on the left. So I've got Leo, Virgo, Libra, and there's the zodiac that we all know and love, with the 12 signs, and they're each 30 degrees. We've gotten so used to this idea of 12 signs of 30 degrees, it almost seems strange to divide the circle into anything else. It's like 12, 12, 12. That's the only way to do it. Well, it's not the only way to do it. The Navamsa chart, which I will just begin describing in a minute, is one alternative to the 12 groups of 30 degrees. But I want to give you a little background history to this. The division of the circle into other divisions goes way, way, way back. So the decans, or decanates as they're sometimes called, is dividing the circle into 36 pieces, so that's 10 degrees each. So you get 3 decans in each sign. So around the outer ring we have the decans, and there are different systems of decans. This system, where the first 10 degrees of Leo is Saturn, next 10 degrees is Jupiter, and the last 10 degrees of Leo is Mars, and so on. First 10 degrees of Virgo is the Sun, etc. It looks like a strange order if you haven't seen this before, but this was used by some of the medieval astrologers. William Lilly and other people refer to this system of decans. So there you have it, a different way of dividing the circle. It obviously overlaps with the idea of the 12 signs, because we have 12 times 3, 36 groups, so it fits nicely with 3 decans in each sign. And the decans go way, way back to around 2000 BC. It's been seen on coffin lids in Egypt, so there's a reference to a Wikipedia article about that. Really amazing when you think that modern system of astrology was assembled maybe around 400 BC, in that time range, and this is going all the way back to 2000 BC, where they have the idea of dividing the zodiac into 36 sections. So this is just to give you a sense that 12 divisions into 30 degrees is not the only way to do it, perhaps not even the original way to divide the zodiac. Now here's another interesting, very ancient reference to dividing the zodiac into little pieces. It's from the Rig Veda, somewhere roughly between 1500 and 1200 BC. I'll read this quote from the Rig Veda. "The wheel of law with 12 spokes does not decay as it revolves around heaven. O fire, here your 720 sons abide." Now, Vedic astrologer David Frawley, his commentary is, quote, "The circle of the zodiac has 12 signs. It has 720 half degrees or twins, making 360 total." So these 720 suns, this is metaphorical, poetic language, are 720 divisions of the zodiac. So it appears fairly clear that going back to 1200 to 1500 BC, astrologers, we could call them, people who are looking at the sky and interpreting what's up there, are dividing the circle into 720 sections. So, to summarize here, we know the decanates were used in Egypt around 2100 BC. And number two, almost certainly half-degree areas were used in Asia around 1350 BC. Okay, and two additional points. In Hellenistic astrology, the astrology of, say, 500 BC to 300 AD, or I think it's usually put later than that, up to 600 or 700 AD, in that time period where astrology started resembling a lot of what we do in modern astrology. They used decanates. They also had other divisions of the circle, such as the bounds. And number two, this is really amazing if you aren't familiar with this. There is a book called The Mythesis by Firmicus Maternus, written about 200 years after the very famous Tetrabiblos by Ptolemy. So somewhere around the year 336, Maternus writes this book, The Mythesis, and in the Mythesis there is an interpretation of each degree of the zodiac. So we have the idea now of the Sabian symbols, where we have an interpretation of each degree of the zodiac. It's a modern set of interpretations. This idea of an interpretation for each degree of the zodiac goes back at least to the year 336. So again, we're seeing an emphasis placed on different ways of dividing the circle. And the Navamsa chart is, I think, the most beautiful. I'm going to call it the queen of the zodiac divisions. Well, maybe that's just my prejudice, but there's something very, very beautiful about the Navamsa chart. I'm going to share this with you, why it's so beautiful. And there's so many other divisions. You may have heard about Dwadasamsa signs, Saptamsa signs. There's the Hellenistic bounds. There's lunar mansions. So many different kinds of divisions. I mentioned decanates. Here I'm going to talk about the Navamsa signs, which do some very interesting and beautiful things. First of all, the Navamsa chart is created by taking the zodiac and making 9 mini zodiacs, you could call them. So here I've got one. We have a zodiac, Aries through Pisces. So instead of stretching Aries through Pisces all the way around the circle, we just go this distance, which is 40 degrees. 1/9 of a circle is 40 degrees. So we make a little tiny zodiac, Aries through Pisces, and then continue with another one for the next 40 degrees. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 zodiacs. That's what the Navamsa chart is. It's based on dividing the circle into 9 zodiacs. And if you count them up, my second line here in the middle of this chart wheel, if you count the number of signs, of course there's 9 times 12, because I've got 12 signs in the zodiac and I've got 9 zodiacs. There are 108 Navamsa signs, right? So if you count these, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, if you counted all of these, you'd get 12 through the sign, 12 through the first zodiac, 12 through the second zodiac. 12 times 9, you have 108 Navamsa signs. You may recognize this number. 108 shows up a lot in religious literature and mythology. There's your connection to 108. And so there are 9 Navamsa zodiacs, and each Navamsa sign is 3 degrees and 20 minutes long. So if you take this 40 degrees of this zodiac from Aries to Pisces, and you divide that by 12, you'll get the 3 degrees 20 minutes. Okay, so each Navamsa sign is 3 degrees and 20 minutes long. Okay, so that's the way the circle is divided. to create these Navamsa signs. And the Navamsa chart is the most important of what are called divisional charts in Vedic astrology, or they're sometimes called vargas. Well, sometimes it's difficult to say what's most important, but when you go to a Vedic astrologer, typically they will immediately create two charts for you: your regular chart, also called the Rasi chart, and the Navamsa chart. By the way, you may hear Rashi as opposed to Rasi, or Navamsha instead of Navamsa. You'll hear both pronunciations. Okay, so that's what the Navamsa signs are. And to summarize some key points, the numbers 9 and 40 are very important because there are 9 Navamsa zodiacs, and each one of those zodiacs consists of 40 degrees. To summarize, I'm going to read from this slide. Number 1, there are 9 Navamsa zodiacs in the entire zodiac circle. There are 9 Navamsa signs in each zodiac sign, right? If I go back here, within the sign of Aries, I have Aries through Sagittarius, 9 signs. So there are 9 Navamsa signs within each regular zodiac sign. And, of course, there are 40 degrees in each Navamsa zodiac. Now, 9 and 40 show up a lot in mythology. 9 is often an image of the Great Mother, of preparation and protection. And you also see 40 show up with some similar qualities. So there are 9 months of pregnancy. The 9 months of pregnancy equals 40 weeks. The Catholics pray to Mary for 9 days in a ritual called a novena. And Jesus was in the desert for 40 days preparing for his trials. So 9 and 40 showing up over and over again as protection, as preparation, as a kind of feminine strengthening quality. And in Vedic astrology, the Navamsa chart is used to get information about marriage and about your spiritual path and how to ease your way through life. Well, what does marriage have to do with your spiritual path? Why is the Navamsa chart associated with these things? Here's my view on it. And this is just my view, from working with this for a very long time and doing research. I believe that the Navamsa chart helps us feel connected. It helps us feel integrated. It makes us feel like we are important members of our village, our family, our social organizations, and our clubs. So that feeling of connectedness and feeling bonded to your environment. You don't feel alienated. You don't feel left out. You don't feel separate. You feel at home. So the Navamsa chart inclines us to have friends and colleagues. It brings healing and wholeness and a sense of fulfillment because you're not alienated, you're not separated, you're bonded and connected with your neighborhood. It's not necessarily a bonding and a connecting with divinity on a spiritual level or other levels. It's that feeling that you are energetically connected with your environment. And the Navamsa chart is gentle and peaceful. It brings a bonding, a healing, a soothing quality of bonding and connecting. And this is why it's related to marriage and family, because it brings peace. In an ancient sense, and it's true today as well, you can think of the marriage as the person leaving their family, their parents, their brothers and sisters, and forming a new family. So you're now bonding outside of the nuclear family that you were born in to participate in society, to have children, to become active with education and social responsibilities. And it's important for our spiritual path because it's how we become whole and healthy and happy, essentially. So we can follow our dreams and our visions and our soul calling. Okay. Now, how do we use something like the Navamsa chart? Well, here, just to give you an idea of one simple way, is if somebody has a lot of planets conjunct in what we call a Navamsa chart. Now, the Navamsa chart is a chart that's created using those zodiac signs. So what you do, let me go back to this wheel. What we do is if somebody has a planet at the beginning of Aries, that planet is in the Navamsa sign of Aries. Suppose they have a planet here. This is between 10 degrees and 13 degrees, 20 minutes of Taurus. That's also Aries. So we can make a chart wheel, and we can take this planet that's here between 10 and 13 degrees of Aries and just put it in Aries. Put it in the sign that it's in. You know what? I hadn't set this up, but I'll show you this for myself. I'm going to go into the Sirius 2.0 software. I'm going to call up my chart and let me shrink this because it's way outside. Shrink this down so it fits in there. Now you can see it. And let me create I'm just shrinking this a little bit more. Okay, that looks pretty good. And let me create a Navamsa chart. I'll go over here to Harmonic chart. Navamsa chart is also called ninth harmonic chart. Now, before I do this, notice that my sun this is the tropical zodiac, is 10 Taurus 38. That's between the 10 and 12.5 degrees. That's in this area, between 10 and 12.5 degrees. So it should come out as Aries Navamsa sign. Well, let's see if it does. I'm going to select 9. Ninth harmonic is identical to the Navamsa chart. So that's something to know. Ninth harmonic is identical to the Navamsa chart. I click OK, and let's see where my sun is. There it is. There's my sun, 5 degrees Aries 41. So it's in Aries, and the 5 degrees 41 is how far proportionally through the Navamsa sign it is. So you can take the position of the planets, where they fall in the Navamsa signs, and take a proportion of how far through the sign they are, and then just place them in a chart wheel. And that's your Navamsa chart. There's different ways of describing how to create a Navamsa chart, but that's one way of thinking of it. And that's why my sun is in Aries in the Navamsa chart, tropical Navamsa chart, also known as the ninth harmonic chart. Okay. So the Navamsa signs are very important. You can make a Navamsa chart, also known as a ninth harmonic chart, and if you see a lot of planets conjunct with small orbs, now I don't have that, but some people do. If you saw a lot of planets conjunct very tightly, they're all within 10 degrees. Suppose there are 3 planets within 7 or 8 degrees, or 4 planets within 10 or 12 degrees, then you are on a strong 9 vibration, a ninth harmonic vibration. That's a modern Western way of using Navamsa signs. It's not exactly how it would be emphasized in Vedic astrology, although they would agree in Vedic astrology a lot of planets in one sign would be important. But one way that I use the Navamsa chart is if I see a lot of planets close together in the Navamsa chart, the person is in that 9 vibration, and 9 qualities are very important to them. What does that mean concretely? It means the person is inclined to be involved in teaching, counseling, or a helping profession, or some other way providing community service. And you can look at what the planets are, and that will give you more information about it. So this is the chart of 9, of bonding, of community, of healing. If you're on a 9 vibration, then these are things that are very, very important to you. In the United States, the leading politicians of the Democratic Party have strong Navamsa charts. And there are other things you can do, there are other things you can look at in the Navamsa chart. You can look at more than conjunctions. You can also look at other aspects. Okay, but our topic here is the magic and mystery of this Navamsa chart. It does some very amazing and beautiful things. And one more thing before I get into these patterns in the Navamsa chart. Everything in astrology has positive and negative potentials. A negative potential that I've noticed in the Navamsa chart, not necessarily emphasized that much in Vedic astrology, is that this interest in participating in your community is so strong that there is a tendency to not confront bad behavior. There's a tendency to indulge people. If somebody is lazy or taking advantage of you or somebody else, there's a tendency not to want to confront them, to get involved in that hostility, that tension. None of us enjoy it, excuse me, but some of us have the courage and bravery and willpower, determination to work through that. Others of us tend to back away. People with strong ninth harmonics really just don't want to get involved in that conflict, and they will sometimes condone or indulge people who are doing negative things. That's the bad possibility of ninth harmonic. Okay, now let's see these patterns that are formed in the Navamsa chart. What the Navamsa chart does, a way to think of it, is it helps soothe the way through the difficulties of life. We all face disease, if not in ourselves, in loved ones. We all face poverty, greed. Everyone is going to physically die. We meet with frustrations and unsatisfied desires. That's part of life in the material world, you could say. But fortunately, we also experience mercy, kindness, the beauty of nature, a mother's love, glorious music and art. In our darkest hours, we often find the help and doors open. This is an image. This is a reality and also a mythic image, a story of life of the ninth harmonic. The ninth harmonic is not that frustration or the darkness. It's that sense of healing, of blessings, of support. And that support is always there, but in our difficult times, it's the most important thing. It's what gets us through those difficult times. And the Navamsa chart, the chart of 9 and 40 of the Great Mother, interweaves with the basic 12 signs of the zodiac, and you can think of it mythically as God's blessing and mercy as a story written in the heavens. So these are mythic stories, mythic images that are expressed through the Navamsa chart. And the first way that this happens, or the first way that we'll discuss here, is when you look at the beginning of the zodiac signs. You look at the beginning of the fire signs. You'll notice that Aries begins with Aries. If I go over here to Leo, the next fire sign, also begins with Aries. Here's Sagittarius, it begins with Aries. So this red triangle is connecting the beginning of the fire signs. And they all start with Aries in the Navamsa chart. You can think of this as each fire sign starts with the beginning of a Navamsa zodiac. And the Navamsa, by definition, is the chart of healing, soothing, bondedness, connectedness. So it's like a blessing from the sky that the fire signs are all connected through the connection in the Navamsa chart of being at the starting point, that the Navamsa energy is released, the Aries, the beginning of the Navamsa chart, igniting the beginning of the fire signs, to, you might say, ensure that the fire signs can be positive, can be beautiful. And the same thing happens with all of the elements. The earth signs begin with the cardinal earth sign. So Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn, this brown triangle, shows that all of the earth signs begin with the cardinal earth sign of Capricorn, and the blue shows that all of the air signs, the beginning of Gemini, beginning of Libra, beginning of Aquarius, all begin with cardinal air, which is Libra, and the water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, this green triangle, they all begin with the Navamsa sign of the cardinal water sign, which is Cancer. Cancer, 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 the 3 points of the green triangle. So each element begins with the cardinal of its own element, giving it a nice initial burst of energy where the 9 quality is woven into the basic tapestry of life. So if you think of the 12 signs as the fundamental components of life, and you think of the Navamsa signs around the outside as a smooth, healing, blessing energy around it, this blessing energy weaves into the fundamental components of life to help heal and soothe the way. So that's why we think of the Navamsa chart as a kind of blessing, as God's mercy, as the quality of the Divine Mother to strengthen us and support us and assist us through the stages of life. You can also look at the 12 signs as the 12 stations of the cross in a Christian story. Or you can think of it as the 12 trials of Hercules in Greek mythology, these 12 stages of life. And as we pass from one stage of life to the next, in this cycle of 12, woven into it is the sweetness and the support of the 9th harmonic to push us on our way with a helpful cardinal energy boost as we begin each of these 12 phases. So as we face our 12 stations on the cross, our 12 labors of Hercules, metaphorically speaking, in our own lives, we get a boost of Navamsa cardinal energy as we start each phase. So, the Navamsa chart is the ointment that soothes. It is the feeling of being connected to a community, being a part of what surrounds you. It brings the feeling that you are not a foreigner, you are not unappreciated, you are not alienated. You are part of something bigger than yourself. You play a part in the community and your participation brings well-being to others. Without you, something important is missing. So it's that feeling that you belong, you are needed. Every person in the community is important. Thus, the Navamsa chart is a chart of marriage and the spiritual path because it brings you to a place of wholeness and healing by being connected and being an important part of all that surrounds you. Now, in this diagram, the triangles are still here. Here's the red, brown, blue, and green triangles. And in addition, there's a black cross. You see the black cross? I've got a vertical black line, a horizontal black line, and also black lines diagonally. So there are 8 sections. So what's happening is this begins to look like a jewel, like a diamond, that we are taking this circle and we've connected it with these 4 triangles, and in addition we have 8 sections, these 2 crosses, the vertical and horizontal cross, and then this diagonal one. So the 8 black lines coming out, and those black lines point to what is called vargottama. Vargottama in Vedic astrology is considered to be a special blessing in the birth chart. Vargottama is simply if your planet is in the same Navamsa sign as the regular sign, or what we call in Vedic astrology the Rasi sign. So for example, let's say that you were born with a planet. Let's go over here to Taurus. Right at the middle of Taurus, very close to 15 degrees Taurus. Well, if there's a planet at 15 degrees Taurus, I've got this black circle around the Taurus glyph here. It's also in Taurus Navamsa. This is a blessing because the inner healing, the Divine Mother quality comes right out into the world. You have this connection to something sweet, healing, and positive and strong. So it's a wonderful place to have a planet. Would be the middle of Taurus. Also the very end of Gemini and the beginning of Cancer. So the last 3 degrees and 20 minutes of Gemini and the first 3 degrees 20 minutes of Cancer are vargottama. The Navamsa sign is the same as the regular sign, and that creates this free flow, direct connection to a healing power of the soul. And what you find out is when you go around and you find all the places where vargottama occurs, it occurs at the cardinal points. End of Pisces, beginning of Aries on the left. At the bottom, end of Gemini, beginning of Cancer. To the right, end of Virgo, beginning of Libra. And at the top, end of Sagittarius, beginning of Capricorn. That's why I've got this vertical black and horizontal black lines pointing to the vargottama. And it also occurs at 15 degrees of fixed. So 15 degrees of Aquarius, Taurus, Leo, and Scorpio. Those are the only places where vargottama occurs. It occurs at the last 3 degrees 20 minutes of the mutable signs and the first 3 degrees 20 minutes of the cardinal. So this is a 6 degrees 40 minute section here at the cardinal points, and then half that size, 3 degrees 20 minutes. So half of 3 degrees 20 minutes is 1 degree 40 minutes. It's from about a little more than 1.5 degrees before the middle of the fixed sign to a little more than 1.5 degrees after it. So it creates this 8 points. And these 8 points are the critical transition points. They're the change of seasons. They're the fundamental transition points in our lives. In some of the pagan religions, they also have holidays halfway between a holiday that celebrates the beginning of each season. So we get the blessing of the Divine Mother as we transition through these stages of life. So this is another way that we see what we can think of mythologically or symbolically as a blessing of the ninth harmonic, that it integrates so beautifully with our normal, regular chart. So, the Navamsa Chart is a kind of divine grace that each zodiac sign begins with the cardinal Navamsa sign of that element. It is an indication that God loves us, and we can experience kindness and goodwill rather than conflict and war. Each of the 12 zodiac signs, which are also the 12 stations of the cross, or the 12 labors of Hercules, is blessed by an alignment with the cardinal Navamsa sign of that element to help initiate that station of the cross with the blessing of the Divine Mother's love. That's what I just said. I'm just saying it again in slightly different words to reinforce the idea. So the Christian emphasis on God's goodness did not begin 2,000 years ago. Christianity gave clear expression to the idea of God's mercy and grace, which is in a sense a mythic idea that transcends specific religions and cultures, but is also highly highlighted and expressed clearly in some theological philosophies. Okay, so the bottom line is that each of the 12 zodiac signs begins with the healing action cardinal sign of the cardinal Navamsa sign, and vargottama occurs at those critical stations of the cross, those 8 points that we see here from these black crosses in this wheel. Okay, and as I mentioned, in Vedic astrology, vargottama is considered to be wonderful. It's very auspicious to have that occur in your chart. So these are holy days, or you might say holidays, which is a condensed way of saying holy days. And these vargottama points are the eightfold path of Buddhism. You could relate it to any mythological concept of 8 as a fundamental structure of life. Okay. And I mentioned at the outset of this presentation that there are 108 Navamsa signs. This is another special, wonderful thing about the Navamsa chart. And 108 is considered to be special, excuse me, in a lot of mythology and religious traditions. There are 108 prayer beads, mala beads in certain religious traditions, 108 steps in the temple. Why 108? Because there are 108 Navamsa signs. And the Navamsa signs are the steps on our path that help us, that are sweet, that bring healing and wholeness and fulfillment. And also, the 108 Navamsa signs are also called padas. Pada is another name for Navamsa sign. Pada comes from the same root as ped, meaning foot, is a step. So the Navamsa signs are the 108 steps to enlightenment. This is made very clear by calling them the Padas, the 108 steps. So what I'm showing here is how the astrological concepts are embedded in mythology and in religious thinking. So, in calling the 108 steps, literally steps, the Padas, this esoteric wisdom or ancient wisdom is not so secret. It's made clear that they are the steps on our spiritual path. Okay. Now, the Navamsa signs are also related to the nakshatras. The nakshatras are groups of 4 Navamsa signs. I'll show you this on the next slide here. So what we have here are 3 rings. In the inner ring are the 12 zodiac signs. The next ring are the 27 nakshatras. So Aries, I've got Aries on the left. This first section of Aries, this glyph here, is for Ashvini, the first nakshatra. So the nakshatras are groups of 4 Navamsa signs. So if you take the first 4 Navamsa signs, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, that's 4 times 3 degrees 20 minutes is 13 degrees 20 minutes. That's the size of the nakshatra. So I just want to point out that nakshatra signs and Navamsa signs are not completely separate. You can think of nakshatra signs as groups of 4 of the Navamsa signs. So you see this intricate patterning going on, where what the ancient astrologers developed is a system of an interweaving, like a finely woven cloth, a beautiful tapestry. It's like the intricate mosaics that we see in the ancient temples. This beautiful interweaving where we've already seen the other connections of the Navamsa chart with the regular chart. And now we see another one that's created by grouping every 4 Navamsa signs, and they share something in common. And that's why they are nakshatras. So these first 4 Navamsa signs have a certain quality, a certain color. So as we take our 108 steps on the spiritual path, when we get to the 5th step, there's also a change in color and tone. And then when we get to the, past the first 8 steps, we get to the 9th step, another change in color and tone to these 4 steps. So they can be grouped together as what are called the nakshatra signs. So I'm just showing the interweaving, this beautiful cosmic tapestry, and how all of these things are extremely important astrologically, and how when we do our astrology chart and we only use the 12 signs, we only use Aries, Taurus, Gemini, we leave out the Navamsa, we leave out the nakshatras, we're leaving out all this intricate, beautiful tapestry, all these blessings and healing powers that are going on through this sophisticated tapestry that has developed over thousands of years. So as I mentioned before, we have the idea of many divisions of the circle going way, way back. So this is deeply embedded in the fabric of astrological thought. It's not a modern idea or just an ancient idea. It's run through the entire history of astrology. And I think astrology benefits by opening up to an awareness of this intricate interweaving complexity and beauty in the sky, and not just focusing on the 12 signs, 12 signs, 12 signs, but to incorporate more of this awareness. Enriches our astrology, I think makes it also a lot more accurate and deeper. Now, a few more things. As if by just some amazing coincidence, just completely different thing that coincidentally brings up the number 108 is that Saturn. We think of Saturn as the timekeeper, as the outermost planet that's visible. And you look at the relationship of Saturn to Sun, the Sun and Saturn are also connected by 108. The Saturn stations, it stops it appears from our point of view on Earth to stop, or what we call a station, when it's 108 degrees from the sun. So when the Saturn is 108 to 109 degrees from the sun, that's when it stations. So if you weren't aware of that, that's just a fact. And on the on this next slide, it's probably kind of small and difficult to read, but what this is showing is the times from 1941 to 2021 when Saturn stations, and also the time when it's 108 degrees from the sun. And it's always within a day. The maximum we see here is 26 hours. And let's see, the minimum is about 14 hours. So over this time period, the point when Saturn stations, the moment when it stations, it either turns direct or it turns retrograde. At that station point, it's within about a day of the exact time when Saturn is 108 degrees from the sun. So for example, if I go to this third section, just randomly jumping in here, it's showing me that Saturn turned retrograde 17 hours after the Sun-Saturn angle was 108 degrees. That's what this third section is telling me. So it's a very consistent pattern that goes on. Go back to my previous slide. I want to read a little bit about how you could think of this. Saturn stations when it's within 1 degree of this magic 108 number. The outermost visible planet, the planet that sets the boundaries of our lives and is the timekeeper, itself comes to a stop. So you think of the timekeeper stopping. It's a moment as if time stops for a moment. It is like the moment between inhaling and exhaling. It is like a moment of silence when the timekeeper stops and changes direction at 108 degrees from the sun. And for that moment when Saturn stations, we step outside the flow of time. We see more clearly. We can reflect on the nature of our lives. This reflection and suspending of time occurs at the time in Saturn's journey when it is 108 degrees from the sun. This is another example of the beauty, the mystery, and the magic of what's going on in the sky if we allow ourselves to move outside the framework of only 12 signs, 12 houses, 30-degree emphasis, and see how the solar system is more organic. It's more subtle. It's more intricate. It's more beautiful than that. The 12 signs of 30 degrees is a fundamental. It's important. It's like a foundation from which all of these other processes happen. So another example of how 108 is important, and how by coincidence or by the beauty of how things are manifest in our solar system, we see the 108 show up also in the Sun-Saturn cycle. Now lastly, I want to finish by saying I've presented this information as mythic information. It's very important for understanding cultural traditions, for understanding the way people live and the traditions that have been handed down over the years. A question arises as to whether it's only belief systems, or is astrology a language of the soul painted in the heavens? And is all of this geometry and interconnectedness simply a way of expressing what is within ourselves? Or is it not an accident? Is it actually part of our lives? Does astrology actually really work more than as a story projected into the heavens? And this is one of the big questions for modern society to answer, because there are so many different points of view. Now, I am an astrologer, and I think this stuff actually works. And I also think that Carl Jung was on the right track when he was trying to integrate physics and psychology to find out how this worked. So some of the modern psychologists are Jungian. They're only interested in the mythic aspect. But I think my intuition about this, my experience, is that everything is interconnected. The science, the psychology, the mythology is all part of one phenomenon. And gradually we'll figure out how the astrology actually works. But whether you, quote, believe in astrology or even open to the possibility, I think the information I've shared here is important for understanding the history of people and how that history continues to affect cultural traditions to this day. Okay, so I've already talked about this. So that's it, my friends. I've got on this page some websites that I'm involved in. Thank you very much for listening. God bless. Namaste.